Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England, and this is COP 3530, Data Structures. And today we're going to talk a little bit about one of the tools that you're going to use in this class called JSFiddle, which is accessible through the website JSFiddle.net. And really, the reason I use this tool, to get down to the bottom line of why I use this tool, it makes it easy for me to grade. But there's more to it than just that. And the reason it makes it easy for me to grade is that I can see everything that you've done. I can see your HTML, I can see your JavaScript, I can make modifications to your code and see the results instantly. Those are all things that are very handy. But the reality is it's an incredibly powerful collaborative tool used by professionals around the world. And it's also kind of the de facto tool used to share JavaScript code and do demonstrations of how to do things in JavaScript. So you will see people saying, well, can you share that on a fiddle so that I can actually work with it? And the fiddle gives you an incredible amount of capability of working with this. It's you can save your stuff, you create an account, and you actually have a dashboard which shows you all your projects. And it's version-based, so you can save multiple versions of your project. And that's kind of interesting because I sometimes, with the class, when I'm grading it, and somebody hasn't actually set the version to their base, basically zeroed out their versions, I'll look at their code and go, oh, they turned in version 158, and I know that they actually went through 158 different versions to get to where they've actually got a piece of working code. And I'm using the number 158 because I just absolutely graded one that somebody went through 158 versions to get to something that worked. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and how it works so that you can actually practically use it. So if you bring up JSFiddle, it's going to look something like this. Okay, there are 4 windows. And the 4 windows just simply make it easy to manage all the aspects of what goes onto a web page. And it really is built for a web page, but it's really built for web pages that are going to have JavaScript interaction. If you don't have any JavaScript, there's really no point in using JSFiddle. But the upper left window is where you put your HTML. That's the elements that are going to get added to the document. Remember the good old DOM. You've got a JavaScript window on the lower left. You've got a CSS window on the upper right. And have some fun playing around with CSS. This is a great tool for playing around with it, but that's not something you actually have to know for this class because you're really not going to have any CSS. But I do notice that students love to sit there and go, oh, you know what, I want to really make this look pretty. I want my array to look really fancy. I'm going to put some CSS in there, and it makes it look good. So we've talked a little bit about why to use this. This is an incredibly powerful tool. And even though it does lack some of the debugging functions that you would normally get from installed tools, anything that you need to do debugging is actually accessible through the browser themselves. All the developer tools necessary to debug JavaScript are built into the developer options of every single browser. So at least finding out where you've got syntax errors, there is a way to do this. Hopefully when you're building these, and I know this is a reality, is that when you're writing this code and you write a whole bunch of code and then you hit that run button and nothing happens, it's extremely frustrating. You need to learn to debug. Okay? You also need to learn to write code in small chunks so that when you've written, you don't write 150 lines of code and then hit run. You write 3 or 4 lines of code and you hit run and see what it does, and then you're good. And you find stopping points. And you know that if you had it working and then 3 lines later it doesn't work, well, something you did in those 3 lines broke it. And you can easily go back to 3 lines and look for what you did to broke it. I do know that some people will stare at a computer's monitor for literally an hour at a piece of broken code and not see the piece that's broken. By the way, your dot is not a dot, it's a comma. You need to make it a dot. Simple stuff like that. It is what happens. Now, using JSFiddle. So, first thing is that every screen has different options. In other words, those 4 screens, they have different options, and you need to be familiar with those options. The first thing that I'm going to say is that when you click on the JavaScript screen and just click in the upper right on the lower left corner, there's a menu of the JavaScript options. And I recommend you not use the onload, which is the default. Okay, I recommend that you go to use the option for the actual JavaScript to be recommended load type no wrap in either body or head. I don't think actually, in the case of what you're doing, it won't make any difference whether it's in the body or in the head, but you have to write the code in a specific way to do onload. There will be cases in later courses where onload is definitely the way that you're going to want to go, because we're going to be using a lot of tools that extend on JavaScript, such as jQuery. But right now, you really don't need to worry about that. This is an easy option. So when you're writing the code, it's going to behave as you expect it to do. What you really want to do is you want to put something onto the HTML, into the document object, have a triggered event, and something occur. Almost all of my assignments require something like that to make it very, very simple. Now, using JSFiddle, as you can see, I've got all three windows here in a JSFiddle that I've got here. I've got some HTML, I've got some JavaScript. They are the actual JavaScript that I've taken from the JavaScript lecture. So if you really want to get to see this, it might be a little small to see on the screen here. Don't worry about it. You can go to my JavaScript lecture and yank that code, which is very easy to read there, and stick it in here, and it's going to work. Now, there's really no need to do that, but you could follow the JavaScript lecture by playing with the code in JSFiddle and seeing if it actually will work. And I want you to type it in. I want you to get into the practice of being able to write code from scratch. So that will work. Now, to run it, there is a button to run. So what do you do when you're using JSFiddle? You write some code, you hit the run button, you see what happens, you go back and you fix it. Okay, that run button is easy to find. It's in the top menu. It says run. It's not going to run automatically. Run doesn't necessarily refresh the browser, because it does not refresh the browser. It does use an asynchronous and basically an AJAX to go ahead and refresh everything. So it does actually refresh what you're running without refreshing the entire page, which is kind of nice. But it's going to happen. You're going to be able to hit the run and see what occurs. Also, this would be horrible if you couldn't save. Now, you do need to make an account to save. And when you make an account, you're going to get a dashboard. And all your fiddles are going to be there in that dashboard. So if you've got JavaScript code that you use over and over again, which I do, I've got an incredibly big incredibly long dashboard of all these different code examples, games that I've written, other things that are actually available in JSFiddle that I use in my classes for demonstration to the students. But you want to save? Save. Now, once you hit the save button the first time, it's going to go away. You won't be able to save anymore, because now you're not saving, you're updating. And every time you update, guess what? It's going to create a new version number. So all those old versions are accessible to you. You can get to them, okay, until you actually set it as a base, and then they all go away. So you can take the current version and say, get rid of all my versions, make this one version 0. And all those other versions go away. But right now, you've got, every time you hit that update button, it's going to give you a new one. So now the toolbar, once you save, is going to look something like this. Run, update, fork, set as base, tidy, collaborate. These all of them are useful. Update says, okay, I'm at a point where I don't want to lose my code. Hit update. A new version is going to be created, and it'll be the current version, and they're numbered. So that's why I know they had 158 tries. Hey, guess what? Good job. You finally got to something that worked. And you can access the versions very quickly and easily through the URL, the URL bar at the top of the browser, because they're going to be /1, /2, /3, /4. That's how I know which one you did. Set as base says, guess what? Let's take all those versions, get rid of them, and set the current version to 0. Now, this is the base, and this is the one that I want. And you can create more versions from that, too. You can still, once you set something as a base, the next version you hit is going to be version 1 again, and version 2. Every time you update, it's going to start back at 0 again. And you also have the ability to collaborate. So you've also got the ability to do something called fork. Forking is going to be, forking code, it does sound bad, forking code is going to be something that you will want to do on a regular basis, okay? And sometimes you're going to think that's what the code actually is. But forking code says, I've got a version of code, can belong to you, can belong to somebody else. I want to take that code, I don't want to mess with that base, I want to start off in a totally new direction and try and see if something works. So what it does is it makes a copy of it and allows you to go off on a tangent, which is kind of neat, because if, let's suppose you're in a series of versions and you say, you know what, I'm going to go back to version 2, and then I hit the fork button in version 2, you've now got 2 copies. The old series of is going to remain, but what's really going to be useful to you is being able to, if you've got a JSFiddle account and you're logged in and you go to my code, you go to one of my code projects and say, oh, you know what? I'd like to start with what Dr. Eaglin has. You can hit that fork button and now you've got your own copy and you can work from there. Because a lot of people like to go to my code copies and say, oh, I'm going to start making versions and versions. I actually can see everything that everybody does to my code until they fork it, then I can't see it anymore. Okay? But all these little changes that people make and trying it out are actually all visible to me because they're doing it inside of my fiddle. And what I do is I go on a regular basis and say, wipe out all everybody else's work, just keep my own work. Okay? Or sometimes something in there might be useful. So there's a tremendous number of really interesting tools. You have the ability to tidy, to make your code look pretty, okay, indents and puts everything where it needs to be and does all the spacing correctly. You can embed the code inside of browsers and stuff, so there's embed codes. You have the ability to actually collaborate real time with other people. So you can have 2 or 3 people working on the same fiddle at the same time. It's one of those neat tools, kind of like Google Drive. You do want to give your code a title. It's in the upper left-hand corner. By default, JSFiddle assigns a hash to your code. Okay, and I don't know if you might know what a hash is, or you're going to know what a hash is by the end of this class, but right now you might not know what a hash is, but it's going to create a hash. And that hash is going to be the title of your code that fits underneath your account. But trying to find a piece of code that you've written by trying to remember the hash is absolutely crazy. Give it a good title, COP 3530, assignment 2, my first try. Something that you can go back to, because you're going to have a dashboard of all your code, so you want to be able to get back to it very easily. And it also allows you to bring in a lot of external resources, which are kind of interesting. So what are you going to do? How are you going to use this? You write code. You test the code by hitting the run option. If the code is good, you save it. If the code isn't good, you keep working on it. And when you get to a version that you really like, you set that code as the base. And if you get to the final, if you've done everything and the assignment is all good, and people have had me know that I will just say, oh, your code's almost there, but you're not done yet. Even after you submit it, go back and do a little bit more until you get it right. I'm more interested in you as a programmer in learning how to do it than I am for penalizing you for turning in something that didn't quite get there. I want you to get there. And I'm going to help you get to the point where you actually know what's going, because this is something you actually have to know how to do. And, getting you to a point where, they just didn't quite get it, well, that's not good enough. You've got to learn it. So by now, you hopefully know what JSFiddle is, and I'm hoping that, you get out there and play with JSFiddle. It's an amazing tool. It's actually quite a lot of fun to play with, and it's relatively easy to work with. So I don't think anybody should have any real issues, but I did want to introduce you at least a little bit to the tool, because I've learned it over time that people learn a little bit of JSFiddle, but if you know all the capabilities of it, it's really has tremendous amount of usefulness of the tools that you don't necessarily use all the time. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Ryan Eaglin signing off from Daytona State College.